All right, so it's been a while since I've done one of these. You probably haven't heard my voice in quite some time, to be completely honest, because there hasn't been much to talk about in NGS. But I figured I would make this video because I've been doing something for a while now that you might have picked up on, especially if you looked at my recent Dyna Assault ARCS record with Lazentos, specifically the one where I posted a 152. The thing you might have noticed, especially as if you're playing Techter, and that my down timings might not be the same as yours. And the reason for that is because I've been messing around with removing the skill that you see on the screen, which is Shifta Effect Amplify. And to go through the basics, essentially what this does is that when you apply Shifta to bond, you increase enemy down accumulation. For example, let's say the boss has 1,000 arbitrary units of down. So you need to do 1,000 down accumulation for an element down. With Shifta Effect Amplify, you would then say, hey, actually, I don't need to do 1,000. I can do 950. One way to look at it, 5%. The other way to look at it is to apply it to your attacks. So for example, Element Pursuit. After the Techter rework back in October, it went from 420 to 450 element accumulation in its base form. So if you apply that 5%, now I'm doing some rounding with the math, you're doing around 473, so a difference of 23. However, which is not being represented here is enemy modifiers. So for example, if you're hitting a weak spot, most weak spots are 1.5x or 150% damage. That also applies to your down accumulation. So for example, instead of that 5%, you're going to do 7.5%, essentially 1.5x. Or if you're looking at the difference between 450 and 473, you're going to look at a little bit more than 30. Well, more than 30, but I'm not doing the math in my head. You get the idea. Why have I removed this? Well, some things have happened since this recent update when we hit level 105, where it feels like the relationship between enemy health and element accumulation, or excuse me, down accumulation, has shifted a little bit. One of the things we have to remember is that as enemies increase in level, their health increases by a certain percentage. But unless Sega makes specific adjustments, their down accumulation stays the same. So the relationship between down accumulation and health is always going to kind of be juggling as the enemy increases in health. Now, before 105, we found ourselves in situations where Shifta Effect Amplify and needing more element down was necessary. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but we might be noticing now that this actually puts me in some tricky situations where things aren't lining up. So what do I mean by that? First, let's look at this very crude visual representation of a down cycle. So we're looking at downs over time. As you'll notice, you work your way up to a down, that down resets. And of course, this isn't drawing the scale because the down resets immediately. After each down, it gets harder and harder and harder. So that's why you see the lines are getting longer, getting thicker. It's just kind of representing the more accumulation is going to require to get to that next down, so on and so forth. Now, before the level 105 update, you probably found a situation kind of like this. This green line represents what I call the ideal resource utilization. And what that means is that you have built the meter to say you have photon blast, you have compound technique, so on and so forth, that you can use on down. Ideally, you would want to have those resources during the down, though there are some situations where you have to be careful of that. We'll talk about it a little bit. Chances are what you've noticed before the 105 update was that, hey, actually the enemy's down and I don't have photon blast. Or maybe during the down, I build up photon blast and then down's over, so I can't maximize my damage. With Shifta Effect Amplify into certain bosses, let's say Darkfall Solace, gradual pressing, those abilities push my down accumulation to better align with the down state. However, one of the things I started noticing is that now, with Shifta Effect Amplify, and we're not even talking about gradual pressing, I don't use that anymore, you find yourself back in the position you were when you didn't use Shifta Effect Amplify, where you have triggered a down too soon and your resources are no longer available. And so because of that, what I've noticed when I started doing is say, okay, well, let's remove Shifta Effect Amplify. And what we start noticing is that these things actually line up very well. But essentially, it's looking as if down accumulation for Techter is, I don't want to say becoming less of a thing, but it's definitely being de-emphasized, and how we need to look at compound techniques usage and photon blast usage. You know, you're really trying to build them and chain them together with that upcoming down. Of course, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show a quick video example of one with Shifta Amplify up and one with Shifta Amplify not up, and kind of showing you the different down timings. But really, and probably this title is going to be a little clickbaiting, it's just something that you need to consider and really understand, how is this affecting your play? Is this going to be something you remove for every quest? You know, for the Dark Falls, it might be important to keep Shifta Effect Amplify depending on timings, but to be completely honest, maybe not. If anything, it might be something you just want to have during team play, but when you're soloing, you might notice that I actually don't need this. And so this is really just one of those, hey, if you start noticing that, oh, you know, I'm doing all of these weird things, I'm having to do this, I'm using PB down to make sure I have enough PB, and you're just really trying to juggle that downtime and to get here, think about removing Shifta Amplify, because that might be the thing slowing you down and causing issues. Other than that, I will catch you next time when I have something to talk about, but coming up, show you some examples of when Shifta Amplify is active and when it is not.